Good evening, church family. Hope you are doing well. This was one of my goals, was to record a message for you while I was in the hospital. So if you'll indulge me a little bit, um, it's the end of my stay, and I am feeling a good bit better. And that left me thinking about you, praying for you all throughout the day. And we are coming up on the end of the month of March. In March, we had the theme of joy, and I really enjoyed this theme. It's one of the more provocative things, pleasantly so, but provocative things that we have to study because all of us want joy, and yet joy seems too often to be elusive. It seems to escape us. And so we've talked a lot, we've talked in somewhat of a focused way, but I'm curious if you were to look back. We talked through a number of habits, we talked a number of routines and spiritual exercises that you could engage in to get your mind back in the right frame so that you could enjoy more of what God is up to. And I'm curious, and I'll probably put this question out on Facebook and you can respond to it, but I'm curious if you've made any progress. If there's something that you've learned, a discipline that you've started to play with, that is helping you in those frustrating moments, those calm moments, those anxious moments, that help you relax, that helps you find joy. Now, joy is not really an emotion. Um, we're told that the Spirit gives us joy. Joy, if anything, is a way of thinking that leads to a feeling of happiness or rest or peace. But joy itself is really a way of thinking. And the Bible never tells us to control our emotions. Emotions are just things that happen. They're not sinful. They're feelings that are a response to our circumstances. However, the Bible very frequently tells us to control our thoughts. Now, tonight, I'd like us to consider John 16. In John 16, he's preparing his disciples to leave. He's telling them, "Hey, I'm gonna leave you, and I need to go and be back with my Father." But throughout chapter 16, John 16, he gives a series of reasons why his followers should have joy. And so as we're finishing the month, I wanted to walk through this passage devotionally. I don't have a lot of tremendous scholarly resources here at the hospital, but this passage was an encouragement to me, and I wanted to encourage you as well. So, if you can imagine, the disciples have walked with Jesus for 3 years, and now he's saying, I'm going to go away, and it's important that I go away. And that would mean a lot of things. They had given up their livelihoods to follow Jesus. That meant the way they had been living for 3 years was about to come to an end. There would no longer be a teacher to follow. And the people that were supporting Jesus, and by extension, his disciples, those people would stop their financial contributions. And so, not only would they be losing access to the great teacher, the Messiah, the Son of God, they would be losing their entire way of life. And it was going to get difficult. At the very least, it was going to get strange. And as the passage unfolds, Jesus also explains that there would be persecutions and tribulations, and that life would get difficult because people actually wouldn't like them, and people would actually oppose them. Now, I bring this by way of introduction because our world is in a very different place. You are likely doing things you did not expect to be doing this week. You are either working in a different capacity, or you're not working at all. Your family is in much closer proximity. Many things that you wanted to do were canceled, and here we are. And here we are. And so the weeks, Jesus anticipated your difficult weeks. He certainly did so in the Sermon on the Mount and other places that speak to maybe more mundane circumstances. But what is clear is Jesus expected that his followers would struggle. They would struggle during the ups and downs of life, and that life would have those down moments where it would be difficult. But he still insisted it would be better if I go away. Now, why would that be? How could we find joy in the absence of Jesus? Well, first of all, he says at the beginning of this chapter that he needs to go away so that he can send the Spirit who is also called the Comforter. And so if you're a follower of Jesus and you have the Spirit, you have the resource that you need to find joy regardless of the circumstances, because the Spirit, the Comforter, comes and quiets our hearts, but also teaches us truth. Jesus said in this chapter that I have many things to teach you, verse 12, but you cannot bear them now. But when the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all truth, for he will not speak on his own authority, but whatever he hears, he will speak and declare unto you that the things that are to come. And he will glorify me, for he will take what is mine and declare it to you. And all the Father has is mine. Therefore, I said, he will take what is mine and declare it to you. That means all the mysteries of the universe and wisdom and direction and guidance would be coming from Jesus, from the Father, through the Spirit to you. So many things of our life, so much of the stress is just us not knowing. It's not knowing the next step. It's not knowing what we ought to be doing. And that, of course, is perplexing and that is frustrating. Once we have our bearings, once we have our direction, we tend to do pretty well. And yet this is Jesus saying, hey, what I would like to do is I'm going to go away, but I'm going to send the Spirit of God, and he's going to dwell in your hearts, and he will always be available to guide and direct you. So what I'm calling this message joy in hard times, it begins because you have the Spirit. You have the Spirit of God to show you the way. So look back over the week, and you might have been asking questions like, how are we going to get through this week? Or how are we going to buy enough groceries to feed all these kids? Or, what am I going to do if I can't get out of the house? What if I get sick? All of the what ifs of life. And yet the Spirit beckons us to come. And there is an answer to all of those questions. And so often, even asking them or asking them in a spirit of prayer before the Lord, you'll find that the Spirit brings guidance. You'll certainly find that the things that you fear, the worst case scenarios, are likely not very reasonable. And the Spirit will show you, you know what, even if you got sick, I would still be with you in the hospital. I will guide you. I'll teach you. I'll let you have conversations with doctors and nurses and patients, and you can still glorify me. It'll be okay. And so the Spirit being present with us is a source of joy because we don't have to navigate all the questions of life on our own. So as you look back over your week, you think about how many points of stress came from the what ifs. You have the resource in the Spirit who is going to guide you into all truth. And what he's going to do is he's going to point you back to Jesus and show you the Son of God and show you what you need to be doing in these moments. And that should give us tremendous joy. Because so often joy is just the knowledge that life is headed in the right direction and we're going to end up in a good place. And both of those things are true. They're easy to forget. But through the Spirit and looking to Jesus, we can be confident of that. Now, in verse 22, he goes on kind of another topic. He says, so also now you have sorrow because I'm going away. But I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice, and no one will take that joy away from you. And this is beautiful. Jesus says, look, I'm going away, and it's going to get hard. I recognize that this momentary blip you call time is going to be very painful. You'll get sick, and you'll lose loved ones, and you'll be betrayed, and it will be very hard. But I want you to know the day is coming. There is a day of future joy, and when you receive that joy, the joy will never leave. You'll never again be discouraged or anxious or fearful. You'll never be depressed. Joy will always be available to you. So not only do we have the Spirit, we have this promise of future joy. And boy, if that doesn't give us a positive outcome, I've just gone through a medical procedure. It's considered a very major surgery. It's hard to recover from. And yet there is the hope. There is the hope of restoring my body or getting to a semblance of stability. And I have craved that. I've craved being strong for you all. I've craved being strong for my family. And it's a wonderful thing to think that the cancer, what was remaining of it, was cut out and that my body is in a safer spot. But just imagine the promise of future joy that the good times, once they begin, will never end. So often we have this feeling of foreboding joy. It's good now, but what about tomorrow? Or what about the next week? And sometimes it's hard to enjoy the good times because we can't relax. And yet, here's a promise that, hey, the day is coming when joy will be yours and it will never be taken away. And that's worth remembering in the hard times, that this is worth it, and that leads to somewhere good. Now, the passage goes on, verse 23, in that day you will ask nothing of me. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever asks the Father in my name, he will give it to you. Until now you have asked nothing in my name. Ask, and you will receive, that your joy may be full. Now, that's amazing. He said, in the past, you haven't asked anything in my name. You've not gotten in the habit of praying in my name. And I've been with you, praying on your behalf. And in the future, when you're with me for all eternity, you won't have to pray in my name either. You'll have access, a new level of access to the resources of God. And you'll have everything that you need. But in the meantime, on this little stretch called earth, called it time, called life, Jesus is inviting us to ask anything that we will in his name, and we will receive. We'll receive from the Father. And what's most telling in this verse 24, is he says, ask that your joy may be full. Now, it's important for us to contemplate once again, looking back. We could study this and it could be academic or it could be life-giving. But I want you to diagnose yourself. I want you to look at the sources of your anxiety. And Jesus is saying, if you felt pressure, if you felt discouragement, if you felt overwhelmed, I offer you a solution. I offer you prayer in my name so that joy can come. Now, because I'm a pastor and because I love you, let me be a little bit provocative and ask, if you prayed and you didn't find joy, well then something went wrong. Okay, you didn't do it in the right way. Now I'm not saying that to make you neurotic or strange. I just want to hold the promise out in front of you. Sometimes we speak before the Father and we just sort of whine in his direction, or we throw up our hands and we throw up an accusation, but we don't get to the joy part. Sometimes we wonder if he hears us, and I promise you, like a father, he knows all of your thoughts. He thinks innumerable thoughts for you every day, knows all the hairs of your head, and knows all of your tears and collects them in a bottle, as the Psalms say. So this is a God, this is a Father who is very near at hand and loves you desperately. And Jesus is coming to us saying, hey, look, if you find yourself stressed out of your mind, come before the Father. Now, we have talked about prayer so often, and prayer is more for us than for God. I promise you, God doesn't need information from you. He's not looking for a suggestion about how he should respond to your problem tomorrow. He's God. He already knows the future. He already has sent the resources. He's looking after you. But there's something life-giving about taking your problems and saying, God, I'm overwhelmed. This is how I feel. This is what I'm afraid of. And Lord, I'm asking you to remind me. I'm asking you to help me think properly. I'm asking you to see your glory once again. Would you remind me of the promises of your word? Would you remind me of your grace? Would you not let me stray from you? Lord, would you still my heart? Because right now it's anxious and I know the truth, but I can't calm down. These are the prayers that I would suggest that you offer up to God, more than the laundry list of, God, I need you to do this or do that. Because sometimes God does exactly what we request. Sometimes, because he's a wise and good Father, he does what is better. He does what we would ask if we knew what to ask for. But we're like young, foolish children. And we know we hurt, and we know what we think would solve the problem. But often God has something so much more beautiful planned. But I think it would be more fitting, in light of this text, it says, come to me and ask. Ask that I would heal your heart. Ask that I would take the fear away. Ask that you would no longer doubt the goodness or the love of God. Ask that you would trust that God is in complete control, that he's good and gracious, and that he can satisfy your heart. You see, so much of the problem, it's in our thinking. That's not a mind over matter thing. It's just we're filled with unbelief, and we feel anxious because we feel like it's ours to control. And God says, no, it's mine to control. Don't worry. But we need to go before him and ask that that we could be once again in fellowship, and that we could trust and follow him without fear, but with confidence. And I promise you, once that confidence comes, you're going to feel the joy returning. Now, what this text does next is just fascinating. The disciples have a little bit of dialogue here, but in verse 27, well, let's go back to verse 26. It says, "In that day you will ask in my name. Now I do not say that I will ask the Father on your behalf, for the Father himself loves you, because you have loved me, and have believed that I have come from God. And I came from the Father, and have come into the world, and now I'm leaving the world and going to the Father." That's unbelievable. I hope you caught that. It says that, I don't even need to speak to God on your behalf. I think there are other faith traditions that say, well, you need to pray to this saint or that saint because they kind of have an in with the Father, and God will honor their request because of who they are, which always seemed a little bit like tortured logic. This text is saying, you know what? Um, Jesus doesn't have to twist God the Father's arm to make him work on your behalf. As he hears you speaking, as he hears you praying, he already has profound love for you. And he is highly motivated to work on your behalf because you're family, because you have loved the Son, and because you've believed on him and you've received all of these spiritual blessings. You are a son, you are a daughter, and the Father himself delights in you and is very anxious to see that you thrive, to see that you have what you need. And he has committed the resources of heaven to provide for you. So we have another avenue of joy. So we've talked about the fact that you are filled with the Spirit of God who will guide you and teach you and show you the beautiful things about Jesus. We have the promise of future joy that can't be lost. We have the promise of answered prayer, that as you ask things in Jesus' name, that they will be responded to, because you are in Christ and you have access to those resources, and your joy can be full. And then you have this profound and beautiful relationship with the Father, that he loves you, and all of his wisdom and all of his power are committed to you and to seeing you thrive. And then, just last, as this is getting a little bit long, in verse 33, he's talking about the time when he is going to be gone and when the disciples will be scattered. And verse 33 says, "I have said these things to you, that you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world." Now, that's an amazing thing, because Jesus has just laid out 5 reasons that they can have joy, that they don't have to be afraid, they don't have to be scared, they don't have to be anxious, they don't need to try to pretend to be in control. None of that's necessary because of what they have in Jesus. But in saying that, he recognizes they don't get it. They don't get it. He's talking about times of trials that are going to come, because when he leaves, he knows that his followers, the church, will be persecuted. He knows that life will get difficult, and just the challenges of life, the sickness and the betrayal and the loss is still going to happen. They're still going to have to battle life on a sin-cursed earth. And referencing in the earlier verses that they are going to scatter, Jesus is also anticipating their personal failure. It's not going to be so long from this that they're going to wander out to the garden and all of his disciples are going to run away because they're scared or because they don't understand. And that leads us perhaps to the most beautiful thing of all, that Jesus has overcome the world. And so whatever your challenge is, whatever it is, whatever your fear, whatever your anxiety, whatever holds you back from joy, just realize that Jesus himself has overcome that. Even if it's your own doubt, even if it's your own sinful habits, even if it's your past that you just have a very difficult time getting past, Jesus says, I've overcome that. Because I have, you don't need to be afraid, and I will walk with you, and I will change you, and I will teach you, and someday, I'll bring you home to be with me and you'll be perfect. But in the meantime, know that I love you. Know that I'm not disappointed with you. Know that I'm walking with you. And that if you'll trust me, you'll walk in the light. You'll have fellowship. I'll forgive all of your sin. I will cleanse you. I will meet you every morning. I will lead you. And I will provide for you. not just material things, but I'll also heal your heart. I'll provide for you emotionally. I'll give you the security you need. I'll give you the strength you need to serve well. Wow. 5 things that give us the resources to find joy no matter what we're facing. That we have the Spirit teaching us always. The promise of future joy. The reality of answered prayer. The certainty of the Father's love. And the promise that Christ has overcome everything that you're facing right now. Do you have joy? What's holding you back? And can I encourage you, in the quiet moments with your family, would you huddle up, answer that question? Be honest. Chances are they already know. These are the things that I've been stressed about. These are the things that have concerned me. And then speak these gospel truths back to yourself. Pray together with friends, family, roommates. Pray together and enjoy letting God flood your soul with joy. And then rejoice together. It's good to speak to you. I look forward to seeing you again. Have a wonderful evening. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, you've offered us so much. Too often, far too often, we live lives of anxiety and frustration. And yet you speak to us gently, but persistently. The joy could be ours. Father, forgive us for struggling. Forgive us for thinking that we need to be in control. Forgive us for insisting on our own way. Father, would you teach us how to have joy? May we as a church family get stronger at this, and may we encourage one another as we walk with you. Father, we love you. We ask these things in your name. Amen.